The gas station sat at the edge of Route 47, halfway between nowhere and forgotten. Dust kicked up from the desert floor as 18-wheelers rumbled past, their drivers too focused on deadlines to notice the boy standing near the air pump. His name was Lennox Granger, 13 years old, and his eyes held the kind of fear that came from knowing something terrible had already begun. If you're hearing this story for the first time, stay until the end, because what happened next would shake an entire highway community and prove that sometimes justice wears leather instead of a badge. It was 6:47 p.m. on a Thursday in late September 2024. The sun hung low and angry over the Nevada flatlands, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt. Lennox had been standing there for 40 minutes, watching every vehicle that pulled in, waiting for someone, anyone, who might listen. His sister Marlo had been missing for 11 hours. She was 16, smart, careful, the kind of girl who texted their mom every hour when she stayed late at the library. That morning, she'd left for school like always, backpack over one shoulder, headphones in, promising to be home by 4. By 6, their mother had called the police. By 7, Lennox had taken matters into his own hands. The official response had been clinical. File a report. Wait 24 hours. Teenagers run away all the time. But Marlo hadn't run away. Lennox knew it in his bones. He'd tried everything, posted on social media, called her friends. Walked the route between their trailer park and the high school twice, eyes scanning every ditch and alley. Nothing. It was like she'd been erased from the earth. That's when he heard them. The sound came from the east. A deep, rhythmic thunder that made the ground vibrate. Engines, not cars or trucks, but motorcycles. A lot of them. Lennox turned toward the highway and saw them cresting the hill. A line of bikes, maybe 20 strong, riding in tight formation. Black leather vests, chrome glinting in the dying light. The lead rider wore a full beard streaked with grey, his hands steady on the ape hangers of a custom Harley. On his back a patch read, Hells Angels MC, Nevada Charter. Most people would have stepped back. Lennox stepped forward. The convoy slowed as it approached the gas station, bikes peeling off to fill up at the pumps. The bearded rider, his vest read Bridger above the front pocket, killed his engine and swung off the seat with the practiced ease of a man who'd been riding since before Lennox was born. Lennox didn't think, he just moved. "Please," he said, his voice cracking. "Please, I need help." Bridger paused, one boot on the ground, and looked down at the kid. His eyes were pale blue, the color of winter sky, and they carried the weight of someone who'd seen too much to be easily surprised. "You lost, kid." "My sister." The words tumbled out in a rush. "She's missing. She left for school this morning and never came home. The police won't do anything. They said to wait. But I know something's wrong. I know it." Bridger glanced at the other riders who'd gathered nearby, men and women with faces carved by wind and sun, tattoos crawling up their arms, eyes that had witnessed both beauty and brutality on the open road. "How old's your sister?" Bridger asked. 16. Her name's Marlo. She's smart. She wouldn't just disappear." One of the other riders, a woman with silver streaks in her black hair, stepped closer. Her vest read, "Clementine." She pulled out her phone. "Got a picture?" Lennox fumbled with his phone, hands shaking, and pulled up a photo from 2 weeks ago. Marlo at their mom's birthday, smiling. Her dark hair pulled back, green eyes bright with life. Clementine studied the image, then looked at Bridger. Something passed between them, an understanding that didn't need words. "Where'd she go missing?" Bridger asked. "Between our place and Ridgemont High. It's about 3 miles east of here." Bridger nodded slowly, then turned to the group. "Pack it up. We're making a stop." Lennox felt his chest tighten. "You'll help?" "Kid comes to us with a problem like this," Bridger said quietly. "Yeah, we'll help." Within 5 minutes, the entire convoy was moving again, but this time with a new destination. Lennox climbed onto the back of Bridger's bike, his arms wrapped tight around the older man's waist, and felt the machine roar to life beneath him. As they accelerated onto the highway, Lennox looked back at the gas station, shrinking in the distance, and thought about Marlowe, about her laugh, about the way she'd protected him when kids at school picked on him for being small. He didn't know what these riders would find, but he knew one thing. The search for his sister had just become something the authorities couldn't ignore. The trailer park sat at the edge of town, like a bruise on the landscape, rusted metal, peeling paint, chain-link fences sagging under their own weight. Bridger pulled his Harley to a stop outside Unit 47, and the rest of the convoy followed suit, bikes lining up along the gravel road like an armored regiment. Lennox's mother, Iris Granger, emerged from the trailer with red-rimmed eyes and a phone pressed to her ear. She froze when she saw the wall of motorcycles. Then her gaze landed on Lennox. "Len, what?" "They're here to help find Marlowe," he said, climbing off Bridger's bike. Iris looked at the assembled riders, 20 men and women who'd stopped their journey to search for a girl they'd never met. And something broke in her expression. Not fear, relief. Bridger approached slowly, removing his sunglasses. "Mom, your boy says your daughter's been missing since this morning. Walk me through what happened." Over the next 10 minutes, Iris laid out the timeline. Marlowe left at 7:15 a.m. She texted at 7:40 saying she was at the bus stop. Nothing after that. Her phone went to voicemail by noon. The school confirmed she never arrived for first period. "Did she have any trouble recently?" Clementine asked. "Boyfriend problems? Arguments with friends?" "No, nothing like that. Marlowe's. She's careful. She doesn't take risks." Bridger exchanged a glance with a rider named Everest, a man with a scarred face and hands like sledgehammers. Then someone took that choice away from her. The words hung in the air like smoke. "Show us the route," Bridger said. They moved as a unit, half the group on bikes, half in the support van that traveled with the charter. Lennox rode with Bridger again, guiding them along the path Marlowe would have walked, down Copper Ridge Road, past the abandoned grain mill, across the overpass above Highway 80. At the bus stop, a rusted shelter with graffiti-covered walls, Clementine dismounted and crouched low, studying the ground. She moved like a tracker, eyes scanning for details others would miss. "Cigarette butts," she said, pointing to 3 crushed Marlboro Reds near the bench. "Fresh, maybe a day old." Everest knelt beside her, his massive frame surprisingly delicate as he examined the dirt. "Tire tracks. Van, maybe. Deep treads. Stopped here recent." Bridger felt his jaw tighten. A van. Cigarettes. A girl who never made it to school. "Spread out," he ordered. "Quarter-mile radius. Look for anything, the clothing, phone, signs of struggle." The riders dispersed like wolves on a hunt, moving through the scrub brush and rocky terrain with practiced efficiency. These weren't amateurs. Many of them were veterans, men and women who'd served in places where finding the missing meant life or death. Lennox stayed close to Bridger, his heart hammering. The sun had dipped below the horizon now, and the desert was bleeding into twilight. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every sound made him flinch. "She's alive," Bridger said quietly, as if reading his thoughts. "If they'd wanted her dead, we'd have found her by now." The words should have been comforting, they weren't. 20 minutes later, a shout came from the east. A rider named Sable, a woman with arms covered in military tattoos, was standing near a dried-up creek bed, waving them over. Bridger and Lennox ran. In the dirt, half buried under loose stones, was a phone case. Purple, decorated with hand-drawn stars. "That's Marlowe's," Lennox whispered, his voice cracked. "She drew those stars herself." Clementine picked it up carefully, turning it over. The phone itself was gone, just the case remained. But nearby, pressed into the soft earth, were drag marks, boot prints, evidence of a struggle. Someone grabbed her here, Everest said, his voice cold. She fought, dropped the phone. They took it, but missed the case. Bridger straightened, scanning the area. His eyes landed on something else. A security camera mounted on a power pole 50 yards away, aimed at the intersection. "That camera working?" he asked. Lennox squinted. "I think so. The red light's on." Bridger pulled out his phone and dialed. "Clementine, get me the feed from that camera. I don't care if you have to call in favors. I need it in the next hour." She nodded and walked away, already making calls. Bridger looked down at Lennox. "Your sister fought back. That means she's strong. That means she's still fighting. We're going to find her." Lennox wanted to believe him, but as darkness swallowed the desert, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. By 9:00 p.m., Bridger's people had assembled at a roadside diner called the Iron Skillet, a place where the owner, a former Marine named Dutch, let the charter use the back room for meetings. The walls were covered in vintage motorcycle posters and photographs of riders long gone, their faces frozen in smiles that would never age. Clementine had worked fast. Through a contact in the county's IT department, she'd secured the security footage from the camera near the bus stop. Now, the entire group crowded around a laptop as the grainy video played. Timestamp 7:42 a.m. Marlowe appeared on screen, walking along the shoulder of the road with her backpack. She was alone, moving at a steady pace, occasionally glancing at her phone. Then, at 7:44 a.m., a white cargo van pulled up beside her, no plates visible, tinted windows. It stopped, and the driver's door opened. Lennox leaned closer, his breath caught in his throat. A man stepped out, tall, heavy-set, wearing a baseball cap pulled low. He approached Marlowe, said something. She shook her head and kept walking. He grabbed her arm. The struggle was brief. Marlowe tried to pull away, dropped her phone, and then a second figure emerged from the van's side door. Within seconds, they had her inside, and the van peeled away, heading west on Copper Ridge Road. The footage ended. Silence filled the room. "Play it again," Bridger said quietly. "Slow it down on the van." Clementine rewound the video, zooming in on the vehicle. The resolution was poor, but there were details. A dent on the rear bumper, a faded logo on the side, something circular with letters too blurred to read. Everest leaned in. "That logo. I've seen it before." "Where?" Bridger asked. "Delivery company, Desert Express Logistics. They do freight runs between Vegas and Reno." Bridger's mind moved fast. A cargo van, a logistics company, someone with access to routes, schedules, places where a girl could disappear without anyone asking questions. "Get me the address," he said. Within 10 minutes, they had it. Desert Express Logistics operated out of a warehouse on the industrial edge of town, near the old rail yard. The business was listed as a small freight operation, but records showed it had been flagged twice in the past year for traffic violations and one noise complaint from neighbors. "We go now," Bridger said, standing. "Quiet. No lights. We find out what they're running, and we find out where they took her." Lennox stood up. "I'm coming. Kid. She's my sister. I'm coming." Bridger studied the boy's face. The determination, the fear, the raw need to do something. He'd seen that look before, in the eyes of soldiers who'd lost their brothers on the battlefield. "Stay close," Bridger said. "Do exactly what I say. No exceptions." Lennox nodded. The convoy rolled out at 9:30 p.m., engines muted as much as possible, headlights off. They moved like shadows through the empty streets, a silent force of riders bound by code and purpose. The warehouse loomed ahead, a squat, concrete structure surrounded by chain-link fencing. 2 white cargo vans sat in the lot, illuminated by a single floodlight. Bridger raised his fist, signaling the group to stop. They parked a block away and approached on foot, moving through the darkness with the precision of a tactical unit. Through a grimy window, they could see movement inside. 3 men unloading boxes from one of the vans. The man in the baseball cap from the video was there, laughing about something, cigarette dangling from his lips. Clementine's hand went to the knife on her belt. That's him. Bridger's jaw clenched. We need to know if she's in there before we move. Sable, who'd done 2 tours in Afghanistan, slipped around the back of the building and returned 5 minutes later. Side doors unlocked, storage area. I heard voices, female, young. Lennox felt his heart stop. Marlowe? Can't confirm. But someone's in there? Bridger turned to the group. We go in quiet. No violence unless they force it. Our priority is the girl. Everything else is secondary. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The side door opened with barely a whisper. Bridger led the way, his movements controlled and deliberate, decades of riding translated into the silent discipline of a man who knew when to speak and when to disappear. Behind him, Everest moved like a shadow despite his size, and Clementine followed with Lennox close at her side. The warehouse interior smelled of diesel fuel, cardboard, and something else, something chemical that made Lennox's stomach turn. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across rows of stacked crates and shipping pallets. The voices came from deeper inside, past a wall of metal shelving. Male voices, casual, laughing about a football game, and then, softer, muffled, a girl's voice. Please, just let me go. My mom's going to call the police. Shut up! A slap. The sound echoed through the warehouse like a gunshot. Lennox's fists clenched. Clementine's hand on his shoulder kept him from running forward. Bridger signaled 3 fingers, then pointed left and right. The riders split into flanking positions, surrounding the area where the voices originated. Bridger moved to the edge of the shelving and peered around the corner. 4 men, 2 unloading boxes from a van's cargo hold, 2 standing near a metal chair where Marlowe sat, wrists zip-tied, her face bruised but defiant. The man in the baseball cap, identified by the van footage, stood over her, arms crossed. Look, kid, the more you cooperate, the easier this goes. Your boyfriend already paid half. We deliver you to the pickup point. You get dropped off somewhere nice. Everyone moves on. I don't have a boyfriend, Marlowe spat. You grabbed the wrong person. The man laughed. That's what they all say. Bridger had heard enough. He stepped into the open, and the temperature in the warehouse dropped 10 degrees. Gentlemen, Bridger said quietly. His voice carried like thunder. Step away from the girl. All 4 men spun around. The one in the baseball cap reached for something at his waist. A gun, Lennox realized with horror. But before he could draw, Everest was there, moving with impossible speed for someone his size. One massive hand clamped down on the man's wrist, and the gun clattered to the concrete floor. I wouldn't, Everest said softly. The other 3 men froze as the rest of the riders emerged from the shadows. 20 figures in leather, their faces hard as stone, forming a wall between the criminals and any hope of escape. Clementine moved to Marlowe, pulling a knife from her belt and cutting the zip ties with a single smooth motion. You okay, sweetheart? Marlowe looked up at her, tears streaming down her face. Who are you? Friends of your brother. Marlowe's eyes widened. Len? Lennox stepped forward, and the moment he did, Marlowe launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck and sobbing into his shoulder. He held her tight, feeling her shake, and whispered, I got you. You're safe now. Behind them, Bridger turned his attention back to the men. The one in the baseball cap was breathing hard, sweat beading on his forehead as Everest held him in place like a bear trap. You're going to tell me everything, Bridger said. Who you work for, where you were taking her, who's paying you. I don't know what you're talking about, the man stammered. Bridger stepped closer. Wrong answer. He nodded to Sable, who pulled out her phone and began photographing the warehouse, the vans, the boxes, the equipment, everything. "See, here's what's going to happen," Bridger said, his voice calm. "We're going to call the police. They're going to come here and find a human trafficking operation, because that's what this is, isn't it? You grab young girls, ship them off to buyers, collect your money." The man's face went pale. "But before the cops arrive," Bridger continued, "you're going to give me names, locations, everything. Because if you don't, I'm going to make sure every news outlet in Nevada knows your face. I'm going to make sure your family knows what you do for a living. I'm going to make sure you can't walk down a street without someone recognizing you." The man's resolve crumbled. Okay, there's a guy, calls himself Roth. He runs operations out of a warehouse near the California border. We were supposed to deliver her tonight. He pays 10 grand per girl. Clementine's jaw tightened. "How many girls?" "I don't know. Maybe a dozen in the past 6 months." Lennox felt sick. Marlowe clung to him tighter. "Where's the pickup point?" Bridger demanded. The man gave them an address, a rest stop 40 miles west, just past the state line. Bridger nodded to Everest. "Make the call." Everest pulled out his phone and dialed 911, giving the dispatcher the warehouse address and a brief summary. Kidnapping, trafficking, suspects in custody. Within minutes, sirens echoed in the distance. Bridger knelt beside Marlowe. "You did good. Kid, you fought. That's what kept you alive." Marlowe looked at him with wide eyes. "Why did you help me?" "Because your brother asked, and because some promises don't need to be spoken out loud." The police arrived 7 minutes later, 3 patrol cars and a detective unit. The warehouse was flooded with lights and officers, and the 4 men were taken into custody without incident. Bridger stayed long enough to give a statement, then quietly signaled for his people to leave before the media trucks showed up. As they walked back toward their bikes, Lennox caught up to Bridger. "Thank you," the boy said. His voice was steady now, stronger. "You saved her." Bridger looked at him. "No, kid. You saved her. You didn't give up. You kept looking when everyone else told you to wait. Don't forget that." Lennox nodded, and for the first time since morning, he allowed himself to breathe. The police did their job. For the first time in Lennox's short life, the system worked the way it was supposed to. Detective Ramona Voss, a woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for not tolerating corruption, took personal charge of the case. By midnight, the 4 men from the warehouse were in holding cells, and by dawn, the FBI had been notified. But Bridger wasn't satisfied. He sat in the back room of the Iron Skillet, a cup of black coffee going cold in front of him, studying the notes Clementine had compiled from the interrogation recordings. The man in the baseball cap, identified as Curtis Fellows, age 41, with priors for assault and fraud, had given up plenty of information once he realized cooperation was his only path to a reduced sentence. The name Roth appeared 17 times in the transcript. "This guy's bigger than we thought," Clementine said, sitting across from Bridger. "Fellows says Roth runs a network across 3 states. Girls go missing from Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico. They get moved through warehouses, rest stops, and then across borders. Some get trafficked to buyers. Others end up working in illegal operations." "How many girls are we talking about?" Everest asked from the corner, arms crossed. "Fellows estimates 50 in the past 2 years. Could be more." The room fell silent. Sable leaned against the wall, her tattooed arms tight with tension. "So, what's the play? The FBI takes over. We walk away." Bridger shook his head slowly. "The FBI will move slow. They'll build a case, collect evidence, go through channels. Meanwhile, Roth gets wind that his operation's been compromised and disappears. Girls who might have been saved end up lost forever." "So we move fast," Clementine said. We move tonight, Bridger confirmed. Fellows gave us the pickup location, rest stop 40 miles west. If Roth's people are expecting a delivery, they'll be there. We intercept, we document, and we hand it all to Voss wrapped in a bow. Everest grinned. I like that plan. One problem, Clementine said. We're not law enforcement. Anything we do could be thrown out in court. Then we don't touch them, Bridger said. We just observe. Make sure they stay put until the real cops arrive. At 10:00 p.m., the convoy rolled west on Highway 80, engines thrumming in the desert night. They moved without lights, using the moon and muscle memory to navigate the empty road. Lennox had wanted to come, but Bridger had been firm. The boy had done his part. This next step was for people who knew how to handle what might be waiting. The rest stop appeared at mile marker 47, a lonely cluster of picnic tables, bathrooms, and a vending machine that hadn't worked in years. 2 vehicles were parked under the single working streetlight, a black SUV and a white panel van, identical to the ones from the warehouse. 3 men stood between the vehicles, smoking, checking their phones. Bridger's convoy stopped a quarter-mile back, hidden behind a ridge. He pulled out binoculars and studied the scene. They're waiting, he said, expecting a delivery that's never coming. Clementine checked her watch. Cops should be here in 15 minutes. Voss said she'd coordinate with Highway Patrol. Then we keep them here for 15 minutes. The riders dismounted and spread out along the ridge, positioning themselves in a loose perimeter. They didn't need weapons. Their presence was weapon enough. At exactly 10:17 p.m., Bridger's phone buzzed, a text from Voss. In position. Make noise. Bridger signaled the group. As 120 motorcycles roared to life, engines shattering the desert silence, the riders crested the ridge, headlights blazing, and descended on the rest stop like a storm made of chrome and fury. The 3 men by the vehicles spun around, panic flashing across their faces. One reached for a gun, but froze when he saw the number of bikes surrounding them. "Don't move!" Bridger said, pulling to a stop 10 feet away. His voice carried over the idling engines. "You're done." The man with the gun, older, grey-haired, with cold eyes that had seen too much, lowered his weapon slowly. "You got no authority here." "I don't need authority," Bridger said. "I just need to keep you from leaving." Sirens wailed in the distance. The grey-haired man, Roth, Bridger assumed, looked toward the highway and saw the flashing lights approaching fast. His face hardened. "You made a mistake. People like me, we always come back." "People like you," Bridger said quietly, "always underestimate how many people are tired of watching you get away with it." Highway Patrol and FBI vehicles flooded the rest stop within minutes. Agents in tactical gear moved in, securing the 3 men and searching the vehicles. Inside the panel van, they found restraints, sedatives, forged documents, everything they needed to link Roth's operation to dozens of missing persons cases. Detective Voss approached Bridger as he stood beside his bike, watching the arrests unfold. "You did good work tonight," she said. "We just made sure they stayed put," Bridger replied. Voss smiled faintly. "Right. Well, your observation just shut down one of the largest trafficking rings in the Southwest. The Bureau's grateful, even if they can't say it officially." Bridger nodded. "There are more girls out there. Fellows said 50. We found one." "I know," Voss said quietly, "but we'll find the others now, because of what you started." As the convoy prepared to leave, Bridger took one last look at the rest stop. The vans, the men in handcuffs, the evidence being catalogued and photographed. It wasn't justice, not yet, but it was the beginning. 3 weeks later, Marlowe Granger stood in front of a packed courtroom and told her story. Her voice was steady, her hands clasped in her lap, her green eyes focused on the prosecutor as she recounted every detail of the day she was taken. Lennox sat in the gallery beside his mother, watching his sister with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. She'd been through hell, but she hadn't broken. Curtis Fellows sat at the defense table, his shoulders slumped, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. On the prosecutor's side, Detective Voss sat with arms crossed, her expression unreadable but satisfied. Marlowe described the van, the men, the warehouse, the fear, and then she described the riders who'd appeared like something out of a movie, who'd cut her free and refused to let her disappear. "They didn't know me," Marlowe said, "but they came anyway, because my brother asked them to." The judge, an older woman named Calloway with a reputation for handing down maximum sentences, listened without interruption. When Marlowe finished, Calloway leaned forward. "Miss Granger, I want to thank you for your courage in testifying today. What happened to you should never happen to anyone. And I assure you this court will hold those responsible accountable." Fellows was convicted on 7 counts, including kidnapping, trafficking, and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 32 years in federal prison. Roth, whose full name turned out to be Theodore Rothenberg, a former logistics manager with connections to organized crime, was convicted on 43 counts spanning multiple states. He received life without parole. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded the steps, shouting questions. But Bridger and his riders weren't there. They'd already moved on, rolling down some highway toward the next town, the next problem, the next person who needed someone to care. Lennox found Bridger 2 days later at a truck stop near the California border. The old rider was eating breakfast at the counter, a plate of eggs and bacon in front of him, when the boy walked in. "Thought you'd be long gone by now," Lennox said, sliding onto the stool beside him. Bridger glanced over. "We're heading out this afternoon. Got a charter meeting in Sacramento. I wanted to say thank you, again, for everything." Bridger set down his fork. "You already said that. I know, but I mean it. You saved my sister's life, and I don't know how to repay that." Bridger looked at the kid, this 13-year-old boy who'd refused to give up, who'd stood at a gas station and begged strangers for help because he knew something the adults didn't, that waiting for permission to act was the same as letting someone die. "You don't repay it," Bridger said quietly. "You pass it on. Someone needs help someday. You help them. That's the only currency that matters." Lennox nodded slowly. "Can I ask you something?" "Shoot." "Why do you do this? You and your people. You don't get paid. You don't get recognition. Why help people you don't know?" Bridger was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Because someone helped me once. A long time ago. And I made a promise to myself that I'd never turn my back on someone who needed it." He stood, dropped a 20 on the counter, and put a hand on Lennox's shoulder. "Take care of your sister, kid, and take care of yourself." As Bridger walked out, Lennox felt something shift inside him. A determination, a sense of purpose that hadn't been there before. He didn't know what it meant yet, but he knew, with absolute certainty, that he'd never forget this moment. If this story moved you, drop a like. It helps us reach more people who need to hear these confessions of courage and humanity. Marlowe returned to school 6 weeks after the trial. It wasn't easy. Whispers followed her through the hallways, students staring and looking away when she caught their eyes. Some were curious, others were cruel. A few offered clumsy sympathy that felt worse than silence. But Marlowe walked with her head high. She'd survived something most people couldn't imagine, and she carried that survival like armor. Lennox stayed close, his presence a quiet reassurance. They'd always been protective of each other, but now there was an unspoken understanding between them. They'd faced the worst and come through it together. One afternoon, a sophomore named Quinn approached Marlowe at her locker. Quinn was small, nervous, with dyed blue hair and a backpack covered in band patches. "Can I talk to you?" Quinn asked quietly. Marlowe nodded, and they walked to the empty bleachers behind the gym. "I heard what happened to you," Quinn said, "with the trafficking thing, and I wanted to tell you something. But I don't know if I should." Marlowe's stomach tightened. "What is it?" Quinn hesitated, then spoke in a rush. "My friend Sage. She's 16. She started talking to this guy online last month. He said he was 18, lived in Vegas, wanted to meet her. She's been planning to run away to see him next week, but after hearing your story, I'm scared. What if it's the same thing?" Marlowe felt a chill run down her spine. "Have you told anyone?" "I tried to tell Sage's mom, but she said Sage was probably just going through a phase. She didn't take it seriously." "Give me your phone," Marlowe said. Quinn handed it over, and Marlowe opened the Notes app and typed a number. "This is Detective Ramona Voss. She's with the sheriff's office. Call her. Tell her everything. She'll know what to do." Quinn took the phone back, eyes wide. "You think it's real? You think this guy's dangerous?" "I don't know," Marlowe said. "But I'm not taking chances, and neither should you." Quinn called Voss that evening. By the next morning, an investigation was underway. The 18-year-old in Vegas turned out to be a 34-year-old man with a criminal record for solicitation of minors. He was arrested before Sage ever got on a bus. Marlowe never told anyone she was the one who'd given Quinn the number. But word spread anyway. Within a month, 3 more students had reached out to Voss about situations that made them uncomfortable. Older men messaging young girls, strangers offering modeling opportunities, suspicious job postings targeting teenagers. Voss brought each case to Marlowe, asking if she'd be willing to speak with the victims, to share her experience. At first, Marlowe hesitated. Reliving the trauma wasn't something she wanted to do. But when she met the first girl, a 14-year-old named Poppy, who'd been groomed online for weeks, Marlowe saw herself in the girl's frightened eyes. "You're not alone," Marlowe told her, "and it's not your fault." Poppy broke down, and Marlowe held her while she cried. Over the next 6 months, Marlowe became an unofficial advocate. She spoke at school assemblies. She met with parents and teachers. She worked with Voss to develop a prevention program that taught students how to recognize trafficking tactics and where to get help. Lennox watched his sister transform from a victim into someone who refused to let anyone else suffer what she'd endured. He was proud, but he also worried. Marlowe carried a weight now that she shouldn't have to bear at 16. One evening, as they sat on the steps outside their trailer, Lennox asked, "Are you okay? Really?" Marlowe looked at the desert stretching out before them, the sun setting in streaks of orange and red. "I don't know. Some days I am, some days I'm not. But I have to do this, Len. If I don't, then what happened to me doesn't mean anything." "It means you survived," Lennox said. "Surviving isn't enough," Marlowe replied. "I want it to mean something more." Lennox understood, because he felt the same way. He'd started carrying Bridger's words with him like a talisman. Someone needs help someday. You help them. It was simple, but it was also the most powerful promise he'd ever heard. At school, Lennox began noticing things he'd never paid attention to before. The kids sitting alone at lunch, the freshmen getting shoved into lockers, the girl who flinched when anyone raised their voice. He didn't have a motorcycle or a leather vest or decades of experience, but he had a voice, and sometimes that was enough. When a new student named Arden, a trans kid who'd transferred mid-semester, was cornered in the bathroom by 3 older boys, Lennox walked in and stood between them. "Leave him alone," Lennox said. The biggest of the 3 boys laughed. "Or what, Granger? You gonna call your biker friends?" Lennox didn't flinch. "I don't need to. You know what you're doing is wrong, so stop." The boys left. Muttering insults, Arden looked at Lennox with gratitude and disbelief. "Why'd you do that?" Arden asked. "Because someone did it for me," Lennox said simply. Over time, Lennox and Marlowe built something neither of them could have imagined 6 months earlier. A network of students who looked out for each other, who reported problems, who refused to stay silent when someone needed help. It wasn't perfect. Problems still happened, but the culture was shifting, and it started because a 13-year-old boy had refused to wait for permission to save his sister. A year after Marlowe's rescue, Bridger received a letter. It arrived at the Charter's Nevada clubhouse in a plain envelope, addressed in neat handwriting. Inside was a single page. Dear Bridger, I don't know if you remember me. My name is Lennox Granger. You helped find my sister last year. Because of you, she's safe. Because of you, I'm not carrying the weight of losing her. I wanted you to know that Marlowe and I started a program at our school. We work with police and counselors to teach kids how to recognize trafficking and abuse. So far, we've helped 7 students get out of dangerous situations. I know it's not much compared to what you do, but I wanted you to know that what you started didn't end with us. It's spreading. Thank you for teaching me that helping people doesn't require permission. It just requires courage. If you're ever back in Nevada, stop by. We'd like to see you. Lennox Bridger read the letter twice, then set it on the bar and stared at it for a long time. Clementine walked over and picked it up, reading silently. That's the kid from last year? She asked. Yeah, he's making a difference. He always was, Bridger said. He just didn't know it yet. 3 months later, the Charter was back in Nevada for a regional meeting. Bridger made a detour. He pulled into the Ridgemont High parking lot on a Wednesday afternoon, his Harley's engine rumbling in the quiet. Students looked up, some curious, some wary. But when Lennox walked out of the main building and saw him, his face split into a grin. You came, Lennox said, jogging over. Got your letter, Bridger replied, shutting off his bike. Wanted to see what you've been up to. Marlowe joined them a moment later, backpack slung over one shoulder. She looked older, stronger. The shadows under her eyes were still there, but they were fainter now. Bridger, she said, and there was warmth in her voice. It's good to see you. You too, kid. Heard you've been busy. Over the next hour, Lennox and Marlowe walked Bridger through their program. They showed him the presentation they'd developed, the resources they'd compiled, the testimonials from students who'd used the information to protect themselves or their friends. We're trying to expand, Marlowe said. Other schools want to implement the program, but it's hard to get funding, hard to convince administrators that it's worth the time. Bridger nodded slowly. What if you had backing, someone with credibility to vouch for you? Like who? Lennox asked. Like a national motorcycle organization with chapters in 48 states and a reputation for community protection work. Marlowe's eyes widened. You're serious? Dead serious. What you're doing, it's bigger than you realize. If we put the Charter's name behind it, doors will open. Schools will listen. Over the next 6 months, the Hells Angels MC partnered with Marlowe and Lennox's program, providing resources, funding, and visibility. Chapters across the country began hosting awareness events, fundraising for prevention programs, and connecting at-risk youth with support services. The program, eventually named the Granger Initiative, became one of the largest youth-focused trafficking prevention efforts in the nation. But for Bridger, the real victory wasn't the scale or the recognition. It was the moment, 2 years after the rescue, when he attended a charity event in Arizona and saw Lennox, now 15, standing on a stage, speaking to a crowd of 300 students about the importance of looking out for one another. The kid who'd begged for help at a gas station was now teaching others how to be brave. And that, Bridger thought, was what promises were supposed to become. 5 years after Marlowe's rescue, Lennox stood at the edge of the same gas station where everything had begun. He was 18 now, a high school graduate with acceptance letters from 3 universities. But he wasn't thinking about college applications. He was thinking about the boy he'd been at 13, scared, desperate, willing to ask strangers for help, because he knew the system wouldn't move fast enough. A motorcycle pulled into the station, not a convoy, just one rider, Bridger. The old man had grey streaking further through his beard now, and new lines creased his face, but his eyes were the same, steady, knowing, kind. "Figured I'd find you here," Bridger said, shutting off his bike. Lennox smiled. "Just wanted to see it again. Remember how it started." "How it started," Bridger repeated, joining him by the air pump. "Or how it changed?" "Both." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the highway traffic roll past. "I got into Stanford," Lennox said. "Sociology major. I want to study how communities respond to crises, how ordinary people become heroes." "You'll do good," Bridger said. "You've already done more than most people do in a lifetime, only because you showed me how." Bridger shook his head. "No, kid. I just pointed you in the right direction. You're the one who walked the path." Lennox pulled something from his pocket, a worn piece of paper, folded and refolded so many times it was soft as fabric. He handed it to Bridger. It was the first letter he'd written to the Charter 5 years ago. "I carry this with me," Lennox said, "to remember that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being scared and doing it anyway." Bridger unfolded the letter, read it again, then handed it back. "Keep it. Pass it on someday. When you meet someone who needs to know they can make a difference." "I will." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the desert in shades of amber and crimson, Bridger climbed back onto his bike. "Where are you headed?" Lennox asked. "North. Got word about a kid in Montana who needs help. Someone saw him at a rest stop, holding a sign asking for food. His parents disappeared 6 months ago. Systems moving slow." Lennox felt his chest tighten. "You're going to find him?" "Going to try." Lennox watched Bridger start his engine, the familiar rumble echoing across the empty parking lot. Before he pulled away, the old rider looked back. "Remember what I told you, Lennox. Someone needs help. You help them. That's the only currency that matters." "I remember," Lennox said. Bridger nodded once, then rolled onto the highway and disappeared into the distance, his silhouette shrinking against the massive sky. Lennox stood there until the sound of the engine faded completely. Then he pulled out his phone and opened his email. There was a message from a teacher in Nevada asking if he'd be willing to speak at a middle school about trafficking prevention. He typed a reply, "I'll be there." Because 5 years ago, a group of strangers had refused to let his sister disappear. They'd shown him that the world was full of people who cared, who acted, who kept promises that weren't spoken out loud but lived in the marrow of their bones, and now it was his turn to do the same. As Lennox walked back to his car, he thought about Marlowe, currently in her 2nd year at UCLA, studying criminal justice, still working with Voss to expand the Granger Initiative into new cities. He thought about the 7 students they'd helped that first year, and the hundreds who'd been helped since. He thought about Bridger and the Charter, rolling down highways across the country, answering calls for help that no one else would hear. And he thought about the promise he'd made to himself, to never turn his back on someone who needed it. The gas station faded behind him as he drove toward home, toward family, toward the future. But he'd be back someday, because some places weren't just locations, they were beginnings, and the best beginnings never really ended. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. If these confessions of courage and humanity touched you, subscribe to the channel and share this story with someone who needs to hear it, because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is remember that we're not alone and that help can come from the most unexpected places. Until the next story, ride safe and keep the promises that matter.